Welcome everyone to today's session organized by Vodafone Africa. This will be the 22nd installment of the Metadata for Machines workshop. My name is Charles Kahiro and I am the Creative Director at TravelWorks Africa. For today's session, we'll be hearing from the Kenya team led by Dr. Reginald, and they will be doing a presentation on their process of uploading the mock data onto the FDP. So I think that one will be quite interesting, as well as we'll be getting an update on the COVID status in Kenya currently. So during the presentation, let's just try and have our mics muted to prevent any background noises from disrupting the flow. So if you're yet to do so, kindly do so now. And if you have any questions for the Kenya team, in this case, it will be Dr. Reginald starting us off, and then we'll have the data steward, William, who's going to do the demo for the mock data. If you do have questions for both of them, you can drop them in the chat box and I can bring them up during the presentation, or you can wait until the end where we are going to have some time for questions. So as always, we want to hear from you, so please do use the chat box as much as you can. And I guess with that, I will hand over to Dr. Reginald. Daktari, karibu.
Thank you very much, Charles. And today's presentation will be done by William and I. And we want to share with you our journey to reaching FDP and what we are trying to do within FDP. So, just trying to go to the next slide, so that's what I'm checking.
My key.
No problem, doctor. Just take your time.
Yeah. Good. Nice there. So the structure of the presentation is to give a general overview of COVID situation in Kenya, the part played by the Kenya government until now, the challenges brought by lockdowns and distancing, the contribution of the Vodafone Africa project to understanding and how to use data for driven policies. So we want to understand that this study is not just about keeping data in the computer and leaving it there, but how can this data influence policies so that it can improve livelihoods of people. At the same time, should such a pandemic happen in another 20 years, we have the information well kept. Okay, so this is the situation of Kenya. This is how we are located in Africa. On the left side, you see the map. Kenya is there, the Indian Ocean. To the northeast is Somalia, to the north is Ethiopia. Northwest is South Sudan, then Uganda, then the south of Kenya is Tanzania. So this is how we are surrounded. So when you're talking about COVID infection, we're trying to see how we are relating with our neighbors. So Kenya as a country, we are about 48 million people, maybe a bit more now. From the March 13th, the Kenya government announced the lockdown of Nairobi and Mombasa after 2 people tested positive of COVID-19. And the current situation by 22nd of September is as follows: that 6,000 infections, recoveries 25,000, and fatalities 600. The fatality has remained quite low and very unexpectedly. So the Kenya government has adopted a strategy of what we call TIT, test, isolate, treat, and even there's follow-up. So during this period, university, colleges, schools, centers of worship were closed. And this is what I just explained before. And then some of the highlights. What did the Kenya government do? So identify the 2 types of persons, those who are asymptomatic and those who are symptomatic. So the situation of asymptomatic lands, The initial number relies on targeted and managing contacts of confirmed positives, currently with ongoing mass testing, which gives a better picture of the extent of the strategies already in place. So the Kenya government has embarked on mass testing. They try as much as possible to reach 10,000 people every day. That's the testing every day. And so when you see the number going to 36,000, maybe 40,000, it just shows that around the country there's massive testing. And then during this period, we have also experienced a lot of social distancing. And everywhere you go, even me, even when I come to college, like today, I'm at my university, we had to check temperature, we had to make sure we have the hand gel, and that everybody is wearing masks. And most of the people have been subjected to working at home, okay? So when you come to Nairobi City at the sub-county level, there have been a formation of rapid response teams. Some of the doctors working with us, like Dr. Asma, Miriam, have been very active in leading this team. There's been training, a pool of COVID-19 training of trainers, resource mobilization for response in case of any suspected COVID-19 case and community sanitization, multi-sectoral platforms with different stakeholders and creation of, like for example, Westland disaster team to support the rapid response team, the same with the Kamkunji, making sure that at the mosques, at the churches, community elders, everybody is involved. The identification of isolation and quarantine sites for COVID-19, of course, now it has been very expensive for the government, and they encourage people, if you are considered to be a carrier or positive, to find a place in the house where you could be quarantined. And there's been a lot of specimen collection and transportation to National Public Health Laboratory for testing, to strengthen the referral systems, speedy evacuation, contact tracing of cases. At the community level, most communities, especially in the informal settlement, there's been community sensitization on the virus, mode of transmission, establishment of hand washing points, discouraging gatherings, public places, disinfection, encouraging face masks to be worn in all public areas, educate on good cough, sneezing etiquettes, that you cough in your elbow and not just hapo, you know, making everybody get the virus, sensitized on social distance and importance of COVID-19 pandemic, a temperature check, and shared contacts of response team members for reporting of any issues. I've been to church recently, and coming out, they had to make sure that my telephone number was taken, just in case somebody in church, in place of worship, was infected, and then they would have to consult me. Okay, so the question is, why is Virus Outbreak Data Network more than keen on data storage? How does it contribute to national policy formulation? So our reference is World Health Organization, which defines health as a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. So well-being refers to positive rather than neutral state, framing health as a positive aspiration. And then looking at the Sustainable Development Goal number 3, which states good health and well-being, where we have universal health coverage integral to achieving SDG number 3, ending poverty and reducing inequalities. Because as we go through this study, we have to see how we influence policies and policies in the area of poverty alleviation and good health and well-being. Who helps us to understand when we say that 6,000 people are infected by COVID-19, 25,000 recovered, and 6 fatalities. It implies that the 6,000 patients affected by COVID have touched the whole nation of 48 million Kenyans. It means that all of us in Kenya are affected, whether by fear, stigma, or trauma. And this situation is also creating anxiety in our neighbors. Because if the numbers in Kenya are increasing, then it means that we are risking lives in Uganda, Tanzania, Ethiopia, South Sudan. It means the lockdowns, social distancing, have contributed to loss of livelihoods, increased marginalization, fuel ethnicity, increased discrimination according to gender, enhanced social stigma and trauma. Increased trauma for all people, for example, wearing masks, or families who have experienced death, those who fell ill and recovered, which are the best coping mechanisms for men mostly. Men normally, we tend to hide our emotions, but then in the end, we burst out. So there's been an increase in domestic violence. How do we handle this? And how do we interpret this data 17 or 20 years from now? How would we handle it? Okay, so fair modern data aligning with existing systems, for example, the Kenya government and policy implications. So the first question would be that the research from Vodun should assist health institutions to store data, and the data should follow fair data principles. This is new for most data stewards, as we have experienced. The first time we wanted to approach the top-down approach, whereby you go to the Ministry of Health and tell them we want to do this study, this research, we need your permission. But then, under the new constitution of Kenya, we have to start with the grassroots. So when we went to the grassroots, the question was that the Ministry of Health uses DHIS system, and we want to introduce fair data points. So how do we incorporate the two? So the challenge from the Ministry of Health was that, why don't you test the two? Test if fair data point can fit with the DHIS2, which is normally popularly used in many hospitals in Kenya. And then the second point that brought us a bit of a challenge was the use of URL. If the Kenya government health centers are using Kenya government or government.ke, would you go and dismantle their system and install FDP? How would you go about it? So we had to think of another way of dealing with this, first of all, as a form of education, demonstration, dissemination. And then from there, we can go back to the government and say, oh, yes, you're using DHIS2, but if we incorporate FDP, we're able to improve in the area of data storage and data access, and then data translation. So when we wanted to do a bit of a test, the institution that came closer to what we wanted to do was Zambezi Hospital, and I really thank them for being on board. And then, of course, Tangaza University then had to be the host. So the COVID-19 data should help us connect to the social well-being of society, that if I go to Zambezi Hospital and they tell me they have been able to treat patients of COVID, this is how we isolated them, this is how we accompanied them, this is how we followed them into the home, then this data should help us have knowledge that should something happen in future, we are able to use this information. And then we have to think of building networks. So we at Tangaza University have been able to build networks of support from different social institutions and medical centers that are working always with us. So even before COVID-19, Tangazo was already working with groups of doctors from across the continent and other continents. For example, when we organize free medical camps across Kenya, we have had doctors in touch with us from Amenedab in India, and I think one of them is on now. Rainbow for Africa in Liverpool, UK, Turin, Italy, Chamberlain and Berkeley from the US. We have always been in touch with these groups to help us gain knowledge. And if we have fair data points in our systems, that we can keep this data for future reference and information. So when we talk of fair data principles, it's always good to remind ourselves what they are, that data should be findable, data should be accessible, data should be interpretable and reusable. Interpretable, that if I go to my machine, I can see the same information that with World Health Organization, and also the KIU is using it, Tunisia using it, Nigeria have it, and that we can compare notes. So how do we make fair data link with existing systems? This is where we are, and we are going to show with what William is going to do next. So I really want to thank Eric and the team from GoFair who have pushed us to reach this level. Sometimes when you're being introduced to a new technology, there's always resistance. But I should thank the team led by Eric, Bart, Case, that team of GoFair, who have helped us to learn a tool through Zoom and wherever other means to reach this level. So what William is going to demonstrate is how we've been able to come to modern in the box, loading the data for research, and using the Tangazo URL as a demonstration for our work. So I would encourage William now to take charge. I will just exit the stage now to allow William to take over.
Well, thank you, Dr. Reginald, for the great presentation that you have just had. I hope you can see my screen.
Yes,
can you see?
Yes,
okay.
It's okay.
Yes, we can see.
Okay, thank you. Now, this is the case reporting for partner institution. I mean, this is the fair data point for Kenya. Under it, we have created a catalog that we have named case reporting for partner institution. Under this catalog, we have data set for the institution that we are partnering with. The first one is Kenya Medical Training College Centers, which is an isolation center for the COVID-19 cases. The second one is Umani Maternity, and the third one is Zambezi Hospital. Under this institution, we have had to collect data using the ECRF forms that highlight the number of confirmed cases, recovered patients, tests due to COVID-19 coronaviruses. As you can see, the metadata was issued on 11th September 2020. Then the language we use is English. Here the theme taxonomy, COVID ontology for case and patient information. The RDF files is here. As you can see, this one. These are the institutions that we are partnering with, Umani, Zambezi, and the KMTC. Under the CRF template, at the moment we have not created one, but we are using the WHO one, which is recommended by the Board in Africa. This one. This is the one we are using. This is the form we are using to collect data from the isolation centers. Then, Then these are the CRFs. These are for Kenya Medical Training Colleges.
Just one moment, William. I don't think we can see your screen anymore.
You can't see it?
Yeah.
Can you see it now?
Yes, yes, we can see the CRFs now.
Sorry. So these are the CRFs that we have created from the data that we have collected. The CRF were created by, for instance, I will just do a short demo here. The KMTC, we are using the template for WHO. Then we assign the code KMTC. This to create a file usually takes like 10 minutes to complete. Then the admission will fill the country is Kenya. Date of enrollment. clinical information. Yes, you can continue with this until you fill the second page, follow up. And then the discharges. See, the data was collected retrospectively. And after creating the form, we create the report. Takes some time, but after loading it, we submitted it to the triple store. These are the reports that we have created. Here you can have a look, show the institution, KMDC, the facility, the country is Kenya. You can go all the way until the form is filled. Then we have the Allegro graphs, where we have the graph saved. Here, you come to the CRF repository and open the CRF files that are saved in the Allegro graph forms. So you can have a look. These are the ID. This one is for Pumwani Maternity Hospital. We haven't done pretty much with this one, and we are still training stewards on how to collect data, and hopefully soon we will bring a doctor on board to do more research. That pretty much finished. Thank you.
All right. And there we have it from the Kenya team. I don't know whether we have any questions and comments for the team and for the plenary group as well.
I have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
For Reginald, thanks for the presentation. It was really insightful. I have a question about the general acceptance of the fair data point approach. So I assume that this is something that the Ministry of Health had not previously looked into until you brought it up. I mean, I guess they were satisfied with the DHIS2 system. And so now you've come, you've approached them with a different idea about an FDP. What is the general attitude towards it? Have you been able to show its usefulness to them? Do they perceive it as potentially helpful, or is it just one of those things where they think, how do we really need it?
Thank you for that question. It's a very good question, because the first time we did was go to the Minister of Health. I even went up to the Cabinet Secretary's office, actually. We even had a chat with his personal assistant. But the question was, what are the grassroots saying? Because the Minister of Health has a policy that if it's accepted at the lower level, then it will be accepted at the upper level, rather than the other way around. But then at the grassroots, especially Westland Sub-County and Kamkunji Sub-County, they wanted to see that whatever we introduce is not going to compromise what they already have as a system for keeping data on patients. So it was to demonstrate that fair data point is good or superior to DHIS2, or study DHIS2 and say at this level we can incorporate fair data points. I think that's where we are. So that's why we started, let's change our strategy, do it fast, do a demonstration, and we are sure they're going to buy into it. And I think some of the Ministry of Health people are following this discussion even now. Some of them are on right now.
All right, that was a good. No, Professor Sakinat, you had raised your hand at some point.
Yes.
Please
I
go ahead.
have some. Okay, thank you. Yeah, I really want to congratulate the Kenya team. The presentation was a beautiful one, and
Professor?
yeah, I would really like to. Hello, can you hear me?
Now we can hear you.
Okay, I said that I would really like to congratulate the Kenya team. That was a wonderful presentation. That I would really like to see how the FDP really looks like. Though he just brush it up, but I would really like him to show me how one of their FDP, how it looks like. Then another question that I want to ask, I don't know if it is meant for the Kenya team or for us generally, that after the creation of the FDP and the CRF form, um, their data, how can we access it? You know, what I mean is like maybe in an Excel format. I don't know if we can see it in an Excel format such that maybe the data scientists could have access to it at the end of the day. Thank you.
So perhaps the first question about FDP and CRF, William could answer. The second one, how do we access the data? I think we haven't developed a policy that border Africa. Can I read data from Tunisia? Can I read data from Mekelle University or KIU? How do we synchronize this data? I think we haven't exhausted that question yet. William, will you like to say something about FDP and CRFs?
Well, I didn't get exactly what Sakinat was asking. Kindly, if you could repeat again, please.
Okay, let me call. Okay, let me come again. Now, what I'm saying is the CRF that you have created for each of the patients. After publishing it at the end of the day, I would really like to see what it will look like. Will it pull all the data together on an Excel sheet, or what format, so that we as data scientists, if we would like to visit the data and with our algorithm, how can we have access to that?
Yes, at the end of the day, after we have published the data, we will have to create an Excel sheet where the data will be put on.
Yes, that's what I'm asking. That I said that I don't know if the question is meant for you or for us generally. That can we access the data in Excel format after you have input all of the patient's data?
I think it's a valid question, Dr. Sakina. I think it's a valid question. It's just now to understand how do we synchronize that data. For example, now today for us in Kenya, what we're trying to do is to demonstrate that actually FDP is possible. And so we have used some patient forms to show that it can work. But now, how do we extract this data that we have on border Kenya and share it with the border Nigeria or Tunisia or Mekelle? It's a valid question. So perhaps we need a policy on that. And this is where we are. I think we need a policy on that. How do we synchronize this data all together? Thank you, Sakina.
All right, just as a follow-up, I believe, and Bart can follow up as well, but I believe once all countries or country projects are able to load mock data onto their FDPs, the next step is a querying process. So ideally, it'll be able to query the graph databases or Allegro graph where the data is currently being stored. And then from that one, depending on the algos that can be generated, you can generate a different set of, I guess, combined data from all the FDPs, which I believe is the next process that we are trying to go into, so we can query not just here in Africa, but even FDPs that are currently being set up in Europe. I see Bart has had his hand raised for quite a while now.
Not for quite a while, but I wanted to comment. I wanted to comment also. Thanks very much for the presentation, Dr. Reginald and also William. And I wanted to say a few words about the question of Dr. Sakinat, because I think, you know, the whole idea is that we end up with a network of fair data points with a situation where when the data and the metadata are published in the right way, then it's also for others to access. So we feel that that is a much better process than, for instance, to exchange the Excel files. Because that is ultimately not what you want to do. You can do it maybe in the start just to check something, but ultimately you want to have this working network of fair data points, where these fair data points point to the underlying data. So I think, and Dr. Reginald said already something in that direction, that now the next step is to see, okay, how can we publish the data that has been input by Kenya and make it accessible also for the others.
Yeah.
But I would really like to see that we use the fair data point network structure for that, rather than now trying to send each other Excel files. Of course, you can do it as a test, but you know, it should be working from the network itself. So that was one comment that I wanted to make. And then I had a question for Dr. Reginald and for William also, and that is, you know, if I look now at the data that you have input, is that mock data only, or is there also some real patient data already included in that batch? And have you been able, whether it's mock data or real data, have you been able to run some analysis over this data also with the allegrograph structure and see that you could really get some results out of that?
Okay, I think William, you can answer that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Professor Bart. Like I said, our data was extracted from an isolation center. One is Kenya Medical Training College, and we extracted from the files of the patient. As for publishing the data, I think we are in the initial stages, and I think with the time we should pretty much publish. And like Professor said, I mean, Reginald, we have to have a policy that allows us to go forward now that we have mocked data in our system.
So, but what happened was that to test that the system works, we had to try different institutions.
Yeah.
And then test it and see that the system is working, and then looking at the loopholes and then seeing that we can improve on what we have. So I think the next step now is to see that we can have some analysis.
Yeah, okay, good.
What comes out of, yes, what comes out.
Very good, very good. But excellent job, excellent job.
Thank you.
All right, any more questions and comments for the Kenya team? I can see the chat box is full of congratulations to the Kenya team, which is great. Questions, comments, insights? All right, I think
well,
that's
Charles,
it.
I think it's just a question I wanted to put to everyone.
All right.
And this continues with the discussion of Sakinat and Bart. Once we have this data in our institutions or universities, how do we now turn it into publishable journal information that people can read as academic information? I think that's the next question. Because here in Nairobi, I've already been asked by 2-3 medical doctors who would like to see that we can create awareness through publications. So perhaps we need to think whether we can have a Modern Africa journal dealing with COVID-19. So just that's something to think ahead as we work together. That's my comment, Charles.
All right. I don't know what the group thinks about that.
I think it's a welcome idea. You know, it also improves our collaboration. It's a welcome idea.
All right. The first vote from Sakinat.
Yes, this is Bert. I also think it's a good idea because this is not only about let's say technical achievement, but it's also very much about the communication, and that is almost as important as the all the technical stuff that we're trying to do. So it's important to broadcast this, to communicate this, to publish this, to make sure that people understand what we're doing, and that will help us to get more support for it.
Yeah, and then I was also wondering whether, as we go through this Vodan exercise, we're able to relate Vodan with the SDG number 3 that talks about well-being. So perhaps in our own institutions, we may have medical facilities that are not well equipped. So this Vodan Africa should challenge us to see how do we improve our medical facilities. Then who are these key partners we can partner with so that we improve our medical facilities? This is one of the questions that came to Tangaza with one of our PhD students who has been studying on how to improve services in hospitals in view of what this virus outbreak. So are we able to see challenges that we have within our own hospitals or institutions that need improvement? Then we can say, hey, but with all your contacts, how do you help us improve the, of course, but you don't have the means, but I'm just using as an example. Yeah. How do we then improve our hospitals to capture this? And who is going to be our key partner? And then maybe General Electric Netherlands or General Electric Texas or General Electric Canada or Japan, Toyota, they can come on board and give us support. Is everybody seeing that kind of vision and focus?
Yes, of course.
Yes, I see that also, and I see that on the pharma side, we get a lot of support also. We see the support from companies like General Electric and like Philips. And so these are really companies that are anxiously looking in terms of how they can support us in a better way. But I fully agree with you. This is then about the communication, about the publishing, about the broadcasting of it, so that more people are aware of it, and then it starts to get bigger and bigger and bigger, and you get more people involved in this.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. I don't know whether we have any final comments from the group.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
First and foremost, congratulations to the Kenyan team led by Dr. Reginald on going into that next step, because yes, we have been on the journey since April on developing this project. And the good news, and which is one of the things that I'm more excited about, is the fact that for now we can actually see a practical example of a case report form that is actually originating from a facility. And one of the things that I'd encourage the African teams, also spearheaded now that we've seen the Kenyan team take that route, is maybe in the future, in the next couple of weeks, we can see more of those case report forms that we can now analyze and be able to point out what are we seeing from this particular facility, what are we seeing from Uganda, what are we seeing from Zimbabwe, what are we seeing from Ethiopia. I think that's where ideally this project should be going. And from my own comment, I'm looking forward to seeing more of these. In addition to that, William, I'd like to see in the future more of the case report from some of the facilities you mentioned, or the ones you've listed there. I think that will really shed some light and give us a clear picture on where or on how things will look like in the future. Thank you.
All right. Some great comments there from Fred. Any final comments?
Okay, as an afterthought, just wanted to request if the team in charge can create another ECRF template, maybe for other diseases like malaria, and also Africa we have other neglected diseases such as Kalazar, which I think, given time or given a chance, we have enough data which needs to be collected.
All right, some good comments there from William. Maybe we can explore the creation of new CRF templates, semantics, at least with the knowledge model behind them already set up for other key diseases that are plaguing the continent. Any additional comments? All right. I'd like to thank everyone.
There is a question in the chat box, Charles.
Oh, let me see. Going up. Yeah, I can see there's a comment on the time it takes to fill a CRF in detail from the patient chart or from an electrical medical record. So I'm not quite sure whether it's a comment or a question for that one by Diata. Maybe they can unmute their mics and clarify it for us.
I think William had, yes, William, you have an answer to this, because that has always been a question from from March when we started. How long does it take you to fill one form? Because that determines how many stewards you need for this kind of exercise. So William, go ahead.
Okay, thanks. To fill the form, first of all, it depends with the availability of the data. Then maybe, let's say you are interviewing a patient. Like for our case, we extracted our data from the files. So we took about 10 to 15 minutes to fill up the questionnaires.
So it's about an average of 12 minutes per form when
Yes,
the
yes.
form has already been filled. But if you have to sit with a patient and you are filling as you are typing, we expect double that time of double that time. So 30 minutes of a patient.
All right, I see another question by Ezekiel around the taxonomy. So what did William put in the taxonomy for the data sets? Or at least in the theme taxonomy question.
Charles, maybe you'd like to say something here.
Well, ideally, from what I can see in the data sets, we have Wikidata links to specific pages that are related to the data set. So for some, let's say for Pumwani Maternity Hospital, it's a Wikidata page linking to maternity hospitals, description of what happens in maternity hospitals, mainly from approaching it from a machine readable standpoint. We also do have links linking to the viral pandemic in Kenya, ideally for COVID-19 pandemic in Kenya for 2020. There's also a Wikidata page for that. So it's mainly themes around the data that is contained in that data set, as well as some themes around the institution that is storing or that availed us that data. I don't know whether that's clear enough.
Yeah, it's quite clear. There is a very good point here from Gusite.
Yeah.
On the issues of time. So it depends on the data to be entered, and maybe the network connectivity, plus the computer strength, plus the bundles. And then the other one we discovered is that if the server collapses, then you're in trouble. Last week or by Friday, we were panicking whether we were going to be ready today because our server at the university had collapsed, but then it was revived on Sunday. So all these factors can intervene when you're working on the data. Thank you, Gusite.
Yeah. I don't know, for Ezekiel, do you have any follow-up questions? Or I see Abdullahi in the comment section highlighting or asking what is a fail-safe way to handle data or Excel. So I don't know, Abdullahi, are you highlighting that Excel is a better way to handle the data, or?
Yes, so I'm just saying that rather than just take the data exactly from the case report form in hard copies to enter into the system, just so we avoid the scenario where you make that effort to enter it and you click submit, there's a server crash or some internet connectivity and that. So probably in such a situation, we could have Microsoft Excel or some Google Sheets to keep populating that data.
Yep.
Then when the network stabilizes and then you transfer them. So I feel I'm just saying it could be some, fail-safe measure of kind of handling data.
All right. Yeah. I see a question from Susan, a lawyer, asking, are we currently backing up data in real time? Like DRP kind of. I'm not sure what the acronym stands for, Susan. Maybe you can unmute your mic and elaborate. But ideally, in terms of the data that is being uploaded on the CRF forms, all that data is mainly going to the online database for Allegrograph. And any changes that are made to those case report forms are as well relayed back to the graph database. So she's highlighting in terms of a disaster recovery plan. Yeah. I don't know whether any of the country projects do have a recovery plan. Maybe Kenya can start us off as we see for the other countries.
Please, no, Charles, I just want to get the question right. The recovery plan for CRF or for FDP or the data stored there?
Yeah, so as per my understanding for the question is whether the data that's actually being put up on the FDP and the CRFs has a real-time backups, ideally, which I believe it does. Now, in terms of a disaster recovery plan, I'm not sure what Susan is alluding to. Hence my request
maybe cloud storage.
For the CRF data or for data that's been uploaded directly onto the FDP as a separate entity.
Maybe upload data, something like that.
Yeah, I guess that's an initiative that the country projects would have to decide by themselves.
Okay, just for one question, the data in the FDP is stored locally, right?
Depends on what you mean locally. It's stored on the server
FDP.
that's holding it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So whether you're on cloud hosting or on-site hosting, that's where the data would rest, ideally. There's a comment from Getu as well. He has a suggestion where when it comes to querying of the data sets, it would be helpful if all the data stewards do explore Sparkle and test querying of the triple store in advance. That's a great comment from Getu. So essentially it's trying to upskill ourselves in terms of what how does querying work for those graph databases? What is Sparkle, and how exactly can we use it? And test it on your own databases, essentially Allegro graph for the data that you're entering, and see what you're getting back in return. I believe that's what you meant, Getu. Yes? Getu, we cannot hear you. I think you're having some network challenges or bandwidth issues. However, I can see in the chat box, your comment has received applause from William, and he'll follow up on the testing in advance or exploring Sparkle. Any follow-up questions and comments? Now, while we're on the chat box, would be your chance to type it in. Or if you want to unmute your mic and ask directly, that can work as well. Going once. Going twice. All right, I think it's a wrap. So I'd like to thank everyone for taking the time to be with us here. And before we disperse, just some announcements before we sign off. Next week will be the final M4M webinar. Yes, I can hear the sighs on the other side of the mics. That will be the last one. It will be the 23rd installment of the Metadata for Machines workshop. It has been a long journey to get to this point. But next week, we are going to do it a bit differently. So we are hoping that we'll be able to put together a panel comprising of the country leads so that they can give us more or less an overview of their journey so far before we now move into the second phase of this project rollout. So hopefully we'll be able to get not just the country leads, but other partner institutions from Philips, from FMO, from Google, CEDA, SDA, SC, all the others, even KIU. We are hoping they'll be able to attend, and then we can have a great and interactive session. So hopefully we'll all be in attendance. We are looking forward to seeing all of you there. So be sure to mark it in your calendars. Tuesday, the 29th of September, we'll be having a panel for our last M4M webinar. All right, and with that, as always, a recorded version of this webinar will be available on the Vodafone Africa website, as well as the YouTube channel, where we have all the other videos as well. So in case you need to make reference to this one or review it, as well as review some of the others that have covered some more technical aspects of this whole fair data concept, as well as the FDPs and everything else, you can find them there ready on the YouTube channel. Just go there and enter in the search box Vodafone Africa, and you will be able to find it. As said previously, be sure to join us next week for the 23rd installment of the Metadata for Machines workshop. Details on or additional details on the workshop will be shared on the various Vodafone Africa comms channels, and we mean Slack and the WhatsApp group. And with that, I think it's a wrap. So thank you again for joining us, and we hope to see you next week.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.